Can you sing along the 5 Pusha T records right now? His records.
Yes.
His records?
Yeah.
Name
I love Pusha. Nostalgia.
Oh, you was a Pusha T fan. He's like, I didn't know he had fans like that. Can you name 5 Pusha T records? No, his records. Pusha T. I love your soul, my dog. You're not in my top 50. You might be in Charlemagne's top 50 and things like that. But you haven't done that much for me in my life. Like I didn't never want to be like Pusha. I never had a Pusha moment in my life. I never thought like you did. Like where I'm from, niggas want to be like you if you was real.
When Pusha T stepped onto that interview stage last night, nobody expected him to pour gasoline on one of hip-hop's oldest rivalries. But that's exactly what happened. The question was simple. Who's the real legend between Nas and the new generation? But Push's answer, pure precision. He leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "When you talk legacy, you mention Nas? Not the rapper still begging for validation." The room went silent. The crowd laughed nervously. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Within seconds, the clip was everywhere. Jim Jones' name started trending alongside Nas and Pusha T, and the internet knew this wasn't just commentary. This was a shot. For years, tension between Pusha and Jim had bubbled under the surface, with subtle jabs, interviews, and social media shade. But this time, Pusha made it personal, defending Nas. Legendary status while dismantling the idea that clout and relevance define greatness. "Ain't nothing wrong with being timeless," he said, his tone sharp. That's something not everybody can relate to. The audience erupted. Hours later, Jim fired back online with a fiery post calling Pusha overrated and obsessed with old heads, reigniting a feud that many thought had died years ago. The culture was watching again, old school versus new school, lyricism versus lifestyle, respect versus relevance. One thing was clear. Pusha T had just reopened a chapter hip-hop wasn't ready to close. And this time, nobody was holding back. The interview had started calm, smooth beats playing in the background, low lights, and a relaxed energy that made the conversation feel more like a barbershop debate than a broadcast. Pusha T sat in the center, wearing that familiar smirk he always had when he knew he was about to make headlines. He was dressed clean, black hoodie, diamond watch, and the confidence of a man who'd already weathered every kind of storm the industry could throw his way. The host, a longtime hip-hop journalist, had been moving through topics easily. New projects, business ventures, his relationship with Pharrell, his beef with Drake. Pusha had been composed, collected, thoughtful until the interviewer asked one question that changed the energy in the room. "Let's talk legacy," the host said, leaning forward. "There's been a lot of talk lately about who still matters, about whether the OGs like Nas still influence the game the same way. Jim Jones said a few weeks ago that Nas isn't moving the culture anymore, that he's respected but not relevant. What's your take?" The moment the name Nas left his mouth, Push's expression shifted. That smirk faded into something sharper. "First off," he said slowly, "anybody talking about Nas not moving the culture must not understand what the culture is." The audience clapped softly, but Pusha wasn't done. "See, relevance comes and goes. Trends die fast. But legacy, that's forever. And that's what Nas represents. You don't have to chase relevance when you already are it." The room went silent. The host raised his eyebrows, sensing the shift. "So you're saying Jim's wrong?" he asked, half smiling. Pusha tilted his head, pausing for a moment before answering. "I'm saying some people mistake noise for impact," he said. "There's a difference between going viral and making history. Nas did the latter repeatedly. And if that makes certain people uncomfortable, that's their insecurity, not his." The quote hit instantly. The audience in the studio broke into applause, and even the host couldn't hide his grin. "That's a strong statement," he said. Pusha shrugged casually. "It's just facts." The man dropped Illmatic when most of these rappers were still trying to figure out their flow. Decades later, he's still dropping albums that sound richer, more intelligent, more grounded than most of what's out now. That's not outdated, that's timeless. And some of these guys can't relate to timeless, so they call it irrelevant. By the time the interview wrapped, people were already clipping and posting the moment online. Within minutes, the snippet of Pusha saying noise isn't impact went viral. The hip-hop blogs grabbed it first, then social media picked it up like wildfire. Pusha T defends Nas fires shots at Jim Jones. Read one headline. Pusha T says Jim confuses attention for legacy, said another. Meanwhile, Jim Jones was in Miami, scrolling through his phone, seeing his name flood timelines again. He laughed at first, shaking his head. "This dude really can't stay quiet," he muttered. But the more he watched, the more his smile faded. He could tell from the tone, the confidence, the phrasing. Pusha wasn't being subtle. This wasn't some passive-aggressive opinion. It was a direct check. Back in Virginia, Pusha's team warned him that Jim was already typing responses. "You just threw gas on something," one of his boys said, half laughing. Pusha looked up from his phone, unbothered. "Nah," he said calmly. "I just spoke the truth. The reaction says more about him than me." By that night, hip-hop Twitter was on fire. Fans were split down the middle. One side was calling Pusha's comments a masterclass in defense for real artistry. The other accused him of being bitter, unable to move past his era. Some said he was stirring things up for attention before his next album. Others saw it as a noble move, standing up for the pillars of the game. "Let's be real," one fan tweeted. "Nas got Grammys in his 40s. Jim got memes." Another clapped back. "Jim got motion. Pusha got grudges." The digital debate turned into a generational war. Old school lyricism versus modern hustle. Art versus hype. Meanwhile, clips kept surfacing from the full interview. One part in particular sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community. The host had asked, "Do you think some rappers talk down on legends like Nas because it makes them feel more relevant?" Pusha leaned forward, eyes locked on the host. "It's projection," he said. "When you know you'll never reach that level of artistry. The only way to make yourself feel bigger is to tear down what you can't replicate." Nas don't have to compete with anyone. He's competing with time, and time's losing. That line spread like wildfire. Even Nas fans started posting it under old videos of his performances. The respect Pusha had earned over the years for his lyricism and authenticity gave his words weight. They weren't just clapbacks. They were a manifesto about legacy. By midnight, Jim Jones had officially responded on Instagram Live, sitting in his car. Smoke swirling, chain glistening. He stared into the camera and said, "Man, Pusha need to stop playing philosopher and start making hits again." Nobody asked him to be the professor of hip-hop. Nas, a legend, no doubt. But ain't nobody spinning Illmatic in the club. We outside making real money, real motion. You keep defending legends, I'm out here becoming one. The internet ate it up. Fans laughed, posted side-by-sides, and memes flooded timelines. Jim talking motion, Pusha talking meaning, one fan wrote. "Pick your fighter." When Pusha saw Jim's response, he didn't reply immediately. He simply posted a black screen on his Instagram story with one line written in white, "When you speak facts." The insecure always scream first. No names, no tags, just energy. That post alone sent the culture into another frenzy. It was classic Pusha, cold, calculated, and lethal without needing to shout. Every hip-hop outlet jumped on it, framing it as a direct response to Jim's rant. Commentators called it surgical shade, a phrase that perfectly fit Pusha's style. No wasted words, just precision cuts. By the next morning, major media platforms were covering it like a heavyweight title fight. One headline read, "Pusha T and Jim Jones reignite the flames, hip-hop royalty versus reality rap." On social media, fans started taking sides again, not just in music taste, but in philosophy. Was hip-hop about hits or heritage? Was legacy about streams or substance? Even other rappers started chiming in. Styles P tweeted, "Ain't nothing wrong with giving flowers to the OGs. If that bothers you, you ain't built right," Killer Mike added. Nas still dropping classics in 2023. That's power. The support for Pusha was growing, but so was the noise. Jim Jones wasn't backing down either. He doubled down with a freestyle snippet posted to his page. Subtle bars aimed straight at Pusha. "Talk legacy, but can't make charts shake. talking kings. But your throne been Drake's. The comment section went wild again. Pusha fans immediately demanded a response. They knew he'd never let that slide. And just like that, what started as a defense of Nas had become the spark for a new chapter in one of hip-hop's most complex rivalries, one where ego, respect, and truth were about to collide again. Bar for bar, with the entire culture watching by the next day, the internet was in full meltdown mode. Clips of Jim's freestyle were everywhere, blogs, YouTube reactions, and TikTok edits looping the line "talk legacy but can't make charts" shake over and over. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them were loud. The hip-hop world hadn't seen energy like this in a while. It felt like a throwback to when rap beefs were poetic, personal, and rooted in pride. Pusha hadn't responded yet, but the silence only. Meanwhile, Jim was basking in it. He posted an Instagram story with the caption, "Motion over nostalgia," playing one of his newer tracks in the background while flashing stacks of cash and designer clothes. It was textbook Jim, brash, confident, and all energy. But beneath the surface, everyone could tell it was more than that. The man felt challenged. Pusha had questioned his understanding of legacy, and Jim wasn't about to be the guy who let another rapper, especially Pusha, define his worth in public. Back in Virginia, Pusha was in the studio calm as ever. He wasn't the type to rush a response. His brother, No Malice, walked in mid-session. "You're already writing, huh?" he asked with a knowing smile. Pusha looked up briefly and said, "I don't do freestyles. I do surgical procedures." He went back to writing. His tone was focused, cold. He wasn't reacting, he was constructing. Every word he put down was measured, every punchline sharpened. "They want chaos," he muttered. "I'll give them clarity." 2 days later, the internet got what it was waiting for. A midnight SoundCloud drop titled Relevance. No artwork, no rollout, no features. Just one track. The first line set the internet on fire. "You chasing hits in the club, I'm building halls of fame in silence." From there, it only got sharper. "You talk motion, I talk milestones. You count streams. One count stones. Solid ones. Not borrowed loans." The bars were layered, cutting, and unapologetically push-up. He never mentioned Jim by name, but everyone knew. Every syllable was a dagger aimed precisely where it hurt: pride, credibility, and legacy. By the time the track hit Twitter, it was already trending worldwide. #Relevance became the #1 hashtag in under an hour. Fans flooded the comments. "He killed him without even saying his name. This is the diss record you write with a suit on." Even industry figures chimed in. Charlemagne thought God called it a clinic in restraint and precision. Nori tweeted, "Pusha talking like he already carved his name in the concrete, while others still trying to rent the block." Jim Jones, of course, couldn't stay silent. The morning after Relevance dropped, he posted a video on Instagram from the gym, shirt off, voice raised. "Y'all love when people act fake deep," he shouted. Pusha talking about legacy? Man, he ain't even top 5 in his decade. He'd been bitter since the mixtape era. The comments were split, half laughing, half defending Pusha. "Jim's sweating legacy like it's cardio," one user joked. But others were serious. "He can't outbar Push. This ain't love and hip-hop. This is war." Pusha didn't reply right away. He never did. But then, the following night, he uploaded a clip on his Instagram story, a short video of a chessboard. A single black knight stood in the center, surrounded by toppled white pieces. The caption read, "End game." That one image did more than a paragraph ever could. It sent a message. He wasn't playing catch-up. He was playing from control. Meanwhile, the fans had turned this beef into a movement. Debates filled timelines. Who defines hip-hop now? Some sided with Jim, arguing that legacy without motion was useless in an era where relevance was everything. Others defended Pusha, saying if your music doesn't age well, it was never classic. Even Nas fans jumped into the mix, calling Pusha the last real defender of lyricism. One post went viral. Pusha defended Nas like a knight protecting the throne, and Jim threw a snowball at a fortress. Within days, radio stations were looping Relevance. DJs called it the most mature diss record of the decade, not because of its aggression, but because of its weight. It wasn't about clout or chaos. It was about art and history. In interviews, Pusha explained it simply. I don't diss people for clicks. I remind them where they stand. That line became another headline. Jim Jones wasn't done, though. He dropped a freestyle response on Funk Flex's show titled Rebuttal Season. The beat was heavy, New York to the core, and Jim came swinging. He talked coke stories like he moved nations per I moved through Forbes pages while he moved through statements. The crowd in the studio hyped him up, cheering after every line. It was gritty, raw, and undeniably passionate. But when fans compared it to Relevance, it was clear Jim was fighting emotion with emotion. And Pusha was fighting with calculation. Still, the culture ate it up. Commentators called it the most lyrical rap week in years. Old heads loved the nostalgia of real bars being exchanged. And younger fans were discovering Nas, Pusha, and the roots of lyrical warfare for the first time. It became a generational bridge, one that reminded everyone that rap, at its core, was still about respect. Amid all this, Nas himself finally spoke up in an interview with Ebra when asked about the back and forth. He smiled and said, "Man, I got love for both of them. Jim talk motion, Pusha talk meaning. The truth is, we need both. But legacy, that's earned. You can't talk your way into it." The crowd clapped. And Nas.com demeanor added even more weight to the conversation. When Pusha saw Nas' response, he reposted the clip with 3 fire emojis and the caption, "The King spoke. That's all." Fans went wild again. For many, that felt like the final word, the stamp of approval from the very man at the center of the debate. Jim, however, took it differently. He posted a story saying, "Old heads protecting old heads." Same story. It was clear for Pusha, the fight was philosophical. For Jim, it was personal. And while one was arguing about art, the other was arguing about relevance. The two were fighting different wars, but in the same ring. And the entire culture had taken sides by the weekend. Major podcasts and music critics were calling it the rebirth of competitive hip-hop. Even legends like Jadakiss and Royce da 5 feet 9 inches weighed in, praising Pusha for reminding the world what lyrical defense looks like. Meanwhile, Jim doubled down, posting videos of him performing in packed clubs with the caption, "This the relevance they talking about." The rivalry had turned into a reflection of the times, a generational divide, a debate about what mattered more, legacy or momentum. But the one thing everyone agreed on was this: Pusha T had just reignited the art of the rap beef. And once again, he had done it without raising his voice, without breaking his calm, and without ever saying his opponent's name. By the time the weekend ended, the tension between Pusha T and Jim Jones had taken over the hip-hop world completely. It wasn't just a feud anymore, it had become a full-blown cultural event, dissected by fans, journalists, and even fellow artists. Pusha's track Relevance had crossed 5 million streams in 3 days, dominating playlists across platforms, while Jim's freestyle rebuttal season had gone viral on TikTok, thanks to his fiery delivery and quotable punchlines. But underneath the hype, something deeper was happening. This wasn't just a lyrical sparring match. Philosophical clash about what the culture stood for. For the older generation, Pusha represented integrity, the belief that true artistry doesn't age, that skill and consistency outlast popularity. For the newer generation, Jim embodied momentum, the grind, the visibility, the ability to stay hot no matter how long you'd been in the game. Both sides had valid points, but neither was willing to back down. 3 nights after Relevance dropped, Pusha made his first public appearance at a music event in Atlanta. The crowd erupted when he stepped on stage, chanting his name before he even grabbed the mic. He wasn't there to perform. He was presenting an award for lyricism, but everyone knew what they really came for: a response. As he stood behind the podium, the cheers turned into silence. He looked around the room, smiled slightly, and said, "Some people talk relevance. Some people are the reason hip-hop's still relevant." The crowd roared. It wasn't a diss. It was a statement, quiet, confident, final. Cameras flashed as clips of the moment hit the internet within minutes. Pusha addresses the beef without addressing it. One headline read, "It was classic him, all precision, no chaos." But Jim saw the clip later that night and wasn't impressed. He went live again from his car, visibly frustrated. "Bro out here giving TED Talks," he said, shaking his head. He acting like he above it, but he, the one who started talking. Don't hide behind philosophy when you threw the first jab. His followers flooded the comments with laughing emojis and fire icons. But even some of his own fans could tell the tone was shifting. Jim was starting to sound defensive, and Pusha didn't even need to reply. Meanwhile, industry insiders began to whisper about how deep the rift had really gone. Sources claimed that mutual collaborators were being forced to pick sides. Producers who worked with both artists were suddenly hesitant to post pictures or credits, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. It had started as a lyrical debate, but now it was affecting relationships and reputations. "It's crazy," one insider said in an interview. "Two men arguing about legacy and relevance might have just changed the whole industry dynamic. People realizing how fragile these alliances really are." The next day, Pusha posted a photo of Nas and himself backstage at a private event. No caption, just the image. Both men were smiling, relaxed, arms crossed like two generals who had already won their war. The internet exploded. Fans declared it the final checkmate. Pusha and Nas together after defending him. "That's poetic," one tweet read. Another said, "Jim better drop a whole album at this point." It was symbolic, the very legend Pusha had defended standing beside him, showing mutual respect. It wasn't just support. It was solidarity. Jim Jones, however, wasn't ready to let go. 2 days later, he announced that he'd be dropping a full response track titled Motion Music. The announcement alone sent fans into a frenzy. "He coming back hard," one fan tweeted. Jim not done yet, but when the track finally dropped, it didn't land the way people expected. The energy was there, gritty beats, passionate delivery, but the message felt reactive. He rapped lines like he hiding behind legends. "I'm living mine loud," he whisper on tracks. "I shake the crowd." It was fiery, but fans quickly pointed out that it lacked the sharpness of Pusha's subtlety. By the next morning, even critics started weighing in. Jim's response is pure energy, but Pusha's precision still cuts deeper, one review said. Another wrote, "Jim's passion is real, but Pusha's control wins the war." And that's when something shifted. Even fans who had been on Jim's side began acknowledging that. Pusha had elevated the argument beyond rap. He had turned it into a reflection of values. Meanwhile, Nas finally broke his silence again. During a live Q&A about his latest album, a fan asked him what he thought about being at the center of the feud. Nas chuckled. "I think it's dope, honestly. I see it as love. Hip-hop was built on debates like this. But what I respect is when somebody fights for the essence, not ego, essence." That's what Pusha did. He reminded people that the bars still matter. The clip spread fast, adding another layer of validation to Pusha's stance. Pusha reposted it with a short caption, "Essence over ego." The simplicity of the statement became another viral moment. For his fans, it was the final word. For his critics, it was proof that he'd mastered how to win without ever looking like he was trying to. Jim, on the other hand, responded with another story. "Everybody philosophers till the numbers drop." But by that point, the conversation had already evolved past him. Pusha's relevance wasn't just a diss, it had become a touchstone in hip-hop discussions about legacy, artistry, and time. Rap purists began calling it a manifesto disguised as a beef. Even publications like The Source and Complex ran think pieces dissecting every line, interpreting his words like scripture. One journalist wrote, "Pusha didn't diss a man. He defended a principle." As the weeks passed, the fire finally began to cool. Jim moved on to promoting new music and touring, and Pusha returned to studio silence, working on his next album. But the echoes of their battle didn't fade. It had reshaped how artists and fans talked about greatness. Suddenly, more rappers were speaking about legacy again, referencing Nas, Rakim, and Big Daddy Kane in interviews. Younger artists started sampling older classics, paying homage instead of dismissing the past. The debate Pusha had reignited had reminded everyone that hip-hop's roots weren't something to outgrow. They were something to honor. Months later, Pusha appeared on a podcast to reflect on the whole situation. The host asked him, "You think the beef was worth it?" Pusha smiled. "It was never about beef," he said calmly. "It was about perspective. People so obsessed with being relevant that they forget relevance dies. Legacy don't. I'd rather be studied than streamed." The line went viral instantly. Even those who hadn't been following the feud reposted it. In the end, the moment that started as a defense of Nas had evolved into one of the most profound discussions hip-hop had seen in years. It wasn't about who could rap better or who had more money. It was about meaning, about what the culture valued and what it risked losing in the chase for clicks. And though Jim might not have realized it, he'd played a part in reigniting that spark. 2. The last word came not from either rapper, but from Nas himself, who summed it up best in a later interview. Hip-hop needs both kinds of voices, the ones that build the legacy and the ones that challenge it. Pusha defended history. Jim reminded us that the game still moves. The balance is what keeps this thing alive. And with that, the feud that began as a spark of ego ended as a lesson. That relevance fades, but art, when it's real, echoes forever. If this clash between Pusha T and Jim Jones reminded you what real hip-hop sounds like, when pride, poetry, and purpose collide, take this moment in. Pusha didn't just defend Nas. He defended the foundation of the culture, lyricism, legacy, and longevity. Jim brought fire, but Pusha brought focus, and somewhere between their verses, the game remembered its roots. If you felt that energy, share this story. Drop a comment about where you stand, relevance or legacy, and hit like if you believe the art always outlives the noise. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate the truth behind the beats, the bars, and the legends who keep hip-hop alive.